After arriving home, Yen sought refuge in the shower, scrubbing her skin with a vigor born of anger and frustration. The hot water turned her skin red, and she wished she could wash away the torment she had endured. Her hands balled into fists, and she found herself pounding on the bathroom wall, as if releasing her anger on the unfeeling surface could somehow bring her relief. Amidst her turmoil, the sudden ring of her phone startled her. She glanced at the screen with confusion etched across her face. The call was from her husband, Yuan Zi. She took a deep breath before answering, trying to steady her voice. Yuan Zi's voice on the other end was a soothing balm to her wounded soul. He apologized for missing her call in the morning, explaining that he had been in a meeting. Concern threaded through his words as he asked about her well-being, and in that moment, the weight of everything she had endured came crashing down. Yan's voice quivered as she told him about a mild flu, a trivial lie to mask the trauma she carried. Yuan Zi's caring words touched her heart, and tears welled up in her eyes. He urged her to take care of herself and assured her he would be back soon. His comforting presence, even through the phone, was a lifeline for her shattered spirit. As he promised to call back after his meeting, she felt a glimmer of hope return. With thoughts of Yuan Zi soothing her mind, she settled into a seat on the bathroom floor. But her respite was short-lived as her phone rang once more. The voice on the other end sent a jolt of fear through her veins. Shenji Jia, his name held a darkness that haunted her every thought. She stood up, her breath hitching as she listened to his cold, calculating words. Yen confronted him, questioning the extent of his sinister plans. She recounted the events he had orchestrated, each revelation deepening her sense of dread. She asked why he had gone to such lengths, finding someone to impersonate her. Jia's voice was laced with a chilling amusement as he admitted to his calculated moves. He knew the futility of her calling the cops, and that knowledge had driven him to create a facade of normalcy. As Yen tried to record his confession, Jia's words cut through her desperation. He mocked her attempt, confirming that he knew her every move. Her struggle to expose him only seemed to amuse him further. He taunted her, his words a reminder of his control over her life. She had no choice but to listen. With a cruel twist of fate, Jia revealed a new layer of his plans. He alluded to her family's safety and left her heart pounding with fear. The call from her mother confirmed his reach, even her parents were not beyond his grasp. Her mother's trembling voice relayed a horrifying tale of a murder aboard their cruise, the victim's blood forming the letters of Jia's name. As the phone slipped from her trembling hands, Yen caught it before it hit the floor. She reassured her mother, urging her to stay safe among the crowd. The fragility of her family's safety was a stark reminder of the power Jia held over her. The phone call ended, but the threat loomed larger than ever. Jia's call came again, and Yen answered with a mixture of fear and desperation. She pleaded for her family's safety, seeking reassurance that as long as she complied, they would remain unharmed. His voice was chilling, his demeanor dripping with sinister confidence. He dismissed her fear, asserting his own reliability compared to hers. Yen dared to ask when the nightmare would end, her voice laced with desperation. His response was as cold as his intentions, the game would end only when he grew weary of it. The call ended, leaving her shaken to her core. The doorbell rang, interrupting the silence that followed. Yen approached the door cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. As she opened the door, she found no one in sight, only a nondescript brown cardboard box left on her doorstep. Suspicion gnawed at her, but curiosity compelled her to open it. Inside the box lay a note, its contents casting a shadow of dread over her. The words on the note instructed her to wear a specific dress that evening, to meet his guests. As she read those words, Yen realized that her torment was far from over. Yen arrived at the address Jia had provided, stepping out of a black car in a stunning pink dress that accentuated her beauty. The party venue seemed to shimmer with extravagance and opulence, a stark contrast to the turmoil that churned within her. As she entered the party, Jia's presence was already looming, and his call drew her towards him. Approaching Jia, Yen addressed him as Fu Xingxing, reminding him of his promise to send her home after the night's game and to keep her family in the dark about the sinister events. Jia's response was a taunting compliment, his words dripping with malice as he noted that the attire suited her more than she'd admit. Suddenly, a man in a white coat emerged, catching Yan's attention. Jia introduced him as President Zhang, and the man's keen eyes scrutinized Yan's appearance. However, he expressed that something was still lacking. Swiftly, he called his servant, directing her to enhance Yan's appearance by styling her hair. Amid the preparations, Yan attempted to engage the servant in conversation, seeking to gather information about President Zhang. Her questions were met with stony silence, and frustration simmered beneath Yan's composed exterior. In the midst of the awkward silence, a discreet knock at the door interrupted their exchange. The servant whispered something to Yan, and it was then that President Zhang made his entrance. Leading Yan back into the party, he presented her as if she were a goddess, drawing admiration from the other attendees. President Zhang proudly displayed a bottle of wine, announcing his intention to finish it and take Yan to a more private setting. As he indulged in his wine, his hand found its place on Yan's waist. However, Yan's gaze remained fixed on Jia, her annoyance palpable. Seated on a sofa, Jia interjected with a calculated remark, revealing the imminent return of Yan's husband, Yuan Zhe. His words were a deliberate provocation, a reminder that Yan's humiliation was unfolding on the eve of Yuan Zhe's return. Yan observed President Zhang's actions, feeling the weight of humiliation bearing down upon her. She made an attempt to shift the situation, suggesting a change of location to maintain a facade of propriety. Whispering in Zhang's ear, she also subtly tried to retrieve something from her dress belt. However, her actions were intercepted by a man in a black suit who seized her hand, demanding to know what she was concealing. In response to the man's inquiry, Yan revealed a condom she had been hiding. Her defiance was palpable as she asked Jia whether she was not even allowed this. The unexpected turn of events left Jia momentarily speechless, his calculated demeanor faltering. President Zhang, unfazed by the revelation, picked Yan up in his arms, expressing his approval of her preparedness. As he carried her toward a private room, Yan cast a fleeting glance at Jia, her determination undeterred. Even in the face of despair, she refused to grant him the satisfaction he sought. With the passage of time, Yan found herself running down the hallway, her feet bare and her desperation mounting. She sought refuge in a bathroom, succumbing to the overwhelming nausea within her. In the midst of her distress, she was met with a haunting sight, Jia's presence, his figure leaning against the bathroom door. The chilling realization settled over her that her tormentor was always one step ahead, a sinister presence that seemed impossible to escape. With a sinister smile playing on Jia's lips, he commented on Yan's ability to escape unharmed from such a sadistic situation, implying a sense of respect for her resourcefulness. Yan's response was laced with annoyance as she brushed off the comment, stating that even death could be as simple as hitting one's head on the ground. Jia's smirk remained as he acknowledged the sentiment, agreeing that killing her would indeed be too easy. Yan's weary and sweat-covered face showed signs of exhaustion as she looked at Jia. She confronted him, recalling an incident 4 years ago when she had spared him out of kindness, mistaking his feigned death in front of her car. She reminded him that she had killed his brother in self-defense and owed him nothing. Folding his hands and maintaining his smirk, Jia provocatively questioned if she was trying to reason with him. Walking toward him with anger boiling within her, Yan dismissed the notion, declaring that she couldn't possibly reason with a beast like him. She moved closer to Jia, gripping his tie firmly before surprising him with a sudden kiss. Enraged, Jia pushed her away, accusing her of being insane. Yan fell to the ground, a satisfied smile on her face, her actions seemingly part of a calculated plan. She bit her lip in a seductive manner, further fueling the tension in the room. Fu wiped his lips in disgust, questioning if she was trying to seduce him. Yan's response was a biting remark, claiming that she might as well attempt to seduce a dog. She then stated that her intention was not to seduce but rather to disgust him, taking a jab at him in a defiant manner. Yan's confidence seemed to rattle Fu, and he responded by pointing a gun at her. Unfazed, Yan goaded him, taunting him to shoot her anytime he found his courage. She challenged him to end her life if he so desired, her defiance on full display. Fu's anger seemed to abate as he lowered the gun, recognizing her tactics. He accused her of trying to provoke him into killing her, ending their twisted game abruptly. With his patience running thin, Fu grabbed her, forcefully dragging her out of the house. He pushed her onto a car, the force of his actions leaving her in a seated position. He ordered his subordinate, Jiang, to drive the car. Fu's grip remained firm as he pulled Yan, placing her forcefully in the back seat. In a tense exchange, Yan demanded to know what Fu wanted from her, her anger and desperation palpable. Fu's grip tightened as he covered her mouth, his laughter a twisted villainy. In a shocking move, he bit her neck with a force that left a visible mark, a disturbing display of dominance. Sitting calmly afterward, Fu hinted at a sinister plan, suggesting that her husband's return from a business trip would hold a new surprise. Yan's face reflected a mixture of disappointment, sadness, and frustration. She branded Fu as inhuman, a sentiment he accepted with a hint of amusement. With a sense of control, he reminded her that she had been invited to the event to accompany his guests, not to defy him. Frustration boiled over as Yen angrily confronted him, expressing her willingness to play his games but refusing to accept his control over her choices. Fu's gaze turned calculating as he insinuated involving Yan's family in his schemes to make her listen. Shock and distress filled Yan's expression as she processed the implications of his words. Overwhelmed, she slumped down, her face a mask of defeat. As Fu stopped the car on a deserted street, he forcibly ejected her onto the road before arrogantly driving away, leaving her stranded in the night. Yan's footsteps echoed as she walked by the side of the road, enveloped in the darkness. The weight of her situation pressed heavily on her, her steps faltering as she felt the weight of despair closing in. The world seemed to close around her, her journey ahead uncertain and fraught with the darkness that had consumed her life. Yen reached home, her complexion was looking as pale as a ghost, and her eyes were sunken and darker than ever. She packed her personal belongings in a red suitcase. Yen stood silently at the entrance of her home, clutching the small bag in her hand, and thought Yuan Zhe would be back in a couple of hours. She has to leave for a few days until these disgusting marks disappear. After a while, she clenched her teeth and resolutely left the entrance. Before going to the hotel, she also bought a smartphone identical to her current one with a SIM card from a foreign number. In the hotel room, she first sent a message to Yuan Zhe, telling him a lie about going on a school business trip. And then I called the school, asking for 3 days off. After finishing these 2 tasks, she took out the new phone to investigate Fu Xinxing. But she still couldn't find anything important about him. At noon, Yuan Zhe replied to her text message. He had just gotten off the plane and told her how badly he missed her, yet he made sure to tell her to take care of herself out there. She told him that she would find time to call him in the evening. Every single one of these exchanges was intercepted by Fu Xinxing. Looking at the contents of the messages, Jiang informed Fu that they are just exchanging loving messages, and it's getting annoying. Fu asked Jiang, "Is she always in the hotel?" Jiang looked at the computer records and replied, "Yes, she never left the Dongjiao Hotel." Fu Xinxing habitually picked up a cigarette, observing that Jiang offered him a light. But Fu Xinxing put the cigarette back, saying, "Never mind, I quit smoking." After a while, when Fu Xinxing was reading a book, Jiang informed him that Yen had left the hotel. In the evening, Yen chose a takeout from a restaurant, and when she was going back to the hotel, she suddenly heard someone calling for Teacher Yen, and when she looked back, she saw the boy whom she had saved from Fu Xinxing's claws. He seemed pleasantly surprised to see her and asked her with a smile, "What are you doing here?" She was a little nervous for a bit, but soon said she was here to meet a friend and took her leave. Reaching the hotel, Yen was thinking about how she could get more information on Fu Xinxing. Someone suddenly knocked on her door. She asked, "Who is it?" "It's me." Fu Xinxing opened the door, he answered quietly. Looking at her new phone lying on the bed, she felt uneasy. So she fumbled, and while searching for a place to hide it, she asked Fu Xinxing to wait a moment because she needed to change into something presentable for him. She tucked the phone under the bed. When she opened the door, Fu Xinxing ridiculed, "Did Miss Yen seize these past few minutes, especially to put on some makeup?" "What brings Mr. Fu here?" she asked nonchalantly, enduring the sickening feeling inside. "I just came here to see you." He looked around the room and said it. His eyes slightly paused on the TV. How unexpected to think that Miss Yen is still in the mood for romantic films. He said it with a slight smile. She sneered at him. "Then what do you think I should do? Cry every day, or jump into the river?" His gaze pointedly swiped across her neck. Pulling her sweater down, he explained unhurriedly, "I don't think marks on your body will disappear in 3 days. How will you lie to your husband after 3 days?" "I'll find another excuse," Yen replied, removing his hand from her neck. With a sneer, he asked her, "What if there are new ones?" She gets frustrated with him, and she couldn't help asking, "New marks? Don't you find playing the same game over and over boring?" Fu Xinxing's grip tightened on her hand with her response, and there was a chill in his eyes. Suddenly, a cell phone rang from under the bed. A hint of surprise flashed on Fu Xinxing's face, and he asked, "How did the cell phone get under the bed?" She could only force herself to be unperturbed and replied faintly, "Maybe it fell down when I was changing and I accidentally kicked it under." Fu Xinxing released her hand and said, "Then why don't you hurry and answer the call?" Yen clenched her teeth and walked to the bedside. As she knelt by the bed, the black sweater was pulled up because of her outstretched arm, revealing a bit of smooth white skin around her waist. As if mesmerized by her curvy, slender body, he walked behind her unconsciously. Yan's focus was all on the phone, she didn't hear his movements. So while getting up on her feet, her head ruthlessly knocked his chin. Covering the top of her head, she looked back at him and shouted, "If you want to look at the phone, just look at it, don't just suddenly sneak up behind people like a thief." Fu Xinxing took the phone but did not look at it, she simply continued staring at her. She looked at him warily and shouted, "Fu Xinxing, grow up, don't always use physical means to take revenge on women." Fu Xinxing's expression changed slightly. He pulled her face and mocked her, saying, "Yan, do you really think you are beautiful? Don't think so highly of yourself." At the same time, he threw the phone back at her and turned away, leaving the room and slamming the door. Sitting on the bed, she finally let out a long sigh of relief.